Okay.
This delicate moment. Thank you so much for doing this, Charlie.
Oh, absolutely.
It's such a unique opportunity, and with all that downtime, I get to sit alongside watching my daughter play volleyball, having those little chats about history, and I'm a real big history buff, even more so with volleyball. So when you started sharing the stories this last summer, I was like, I got to jump on this opportunity now because if you look this stuff up, no one has it documented. It's like these are the behind the scenes stories that you have. So start with an introduction. Charlie Brand, we'll just say volleyball extraordinaire.
I'm just
Which go with that. A big
no,
fan of the game.
a big fan of the game. Exactly.
So we'll start off discussing how this all came about in our discussion from this last summer. You said that you were on a podcast with Danny. Belly Digs, I believe, is the podcast.
Belly digs.
Yes.
Belly digs.
And I gave it a good listen. And special thanks to Danny for sending that file along. And it's going to make its way around. I'm sorry, it was unintentional.
Danny Alvarez is quite a character, let me tell you.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
But it was good stuff. And is primarily a coaching-based podcast. But you talked about your background and experience. I wanted to go and start there and then move into what we had initially discussed about the history, some of the things, the transformation of the game, and hopefully, if you feel comfortable, I want you to share about some of the players that you've come across because you've seen quite a few great players in your time in the game.
Very
so
lucky.
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
So, how'd you get into the game?
Well, you got to realize that volleyball was really new to the United States, even though we took the game and took it internationally through the armed services and taught the game to everybody, especially the Asian countries.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't even introduced at the Olympics until 1964. That was the first year when volleyball was in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
Olympics were in Tokyo. But high school in my day was, I played football, played basketball, and then during the spring you'd go slap it around a little bit and you called it volleyball.
Yeah.
And so I went to UC Irvine, very first class in 1965, and our basketball coach, in those days you had to play freshmen. The freshmen had to play freshmen. So our freshman basketball coach, a guy named Dick Davis, who was an old AAA in the sand, was teaching a sand volleyball class.
Okay.
Now, also in those days, the college coaches made more money teaching classes than they made coaching. I mean, it's kind of changed a lot now, but in those days, that's how it was. So he had offered a sand volleyball class, and nobody signed up for it. So he wasn't going to get paid. So he had all of us go down and sign up for his class.
Okay.
And the class was held at Big Corona at the north end because the only 4 courts were at the north end.
Mm-hmm.
And we started playing down there, and all of the basketball players realized what a compliment the game of volleyball was for our basketball skills.
Okay.
And what a great, you could do 2 sports, and really they worked in conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
So we all started playing over there, and that's where I first got started.
And just for time frame for listeners, what year, if you don't mind revealing your age, so much did that occur?
Well, 1965
Okay.
is when UCI first opened. That was, as I say, I was on the freshman class there.
Mm-hmm.
And we started playing, tournaments, sand tournaments, and it was kind of interesting because then we started playing a little bit indoor, and that was fun because you could jump and maybe move a little bit better, and so it was a good nighttime activity.
Right.
So especially as a basketball player, you find out you spend half your life breaking into gyms, to practice.
Right.
And so that was a natural just to break in to play volleyball. So we
Yeah.
started playing a lot of volleyball then.
Now, how did you learn the game of volleyball? Obviously you have the fundamental levels through this class, but at the level, especially since some of the athletes you've been working with over the years, there's a starting point and then your development of the knowledge of the game. Who do you owe that to, and how did you get into the intricacies of the game?
Well, one of the things I loved about when you first start the first part of a sport is you've got to think about it, try different things, and find the successful way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how a lot of players were. And it was a little bit more individual then. Most people were playing doubles.
Right.
But as we started playing more and more and breaking into gyms, as I said, guys would come down. UCLA's program was good.
Right.
And so some people would come down. We go to Newport Harbor in the girls' gym and slide in on Sunday night, and the word of mouth would get out, and then some really good players would come. Well, we were playing some 6-man, and in those days, whoever's middle front set, and that was how it was. And we were lucky enough to have some players from UCLA come down, and it just happened to be in the gym that night, and they were explaining to us how you could have a back row setter that came out of the back row and set. And so we started watching this, and then we figured out that was called a 6-2. So now we started branching with that. Then a few years later, you found out one setter was better than the other setter. So we want that guy to set the whole time. And so then we went, or everybody kind of went to a 5-1 or 6-2 based on what their philosophy was.
Right. Now, so going back to the middleman set, that necessarily wasn't the best setter then, from what I understand. It wasn't even a true 4-2 where you had your best setter who's in the front row setting. It was just whoever's middle front. And then they figured out that your angles were better, especially with the majority of your hitters being right-handed, to have the front right set. And then both those middle and the outside were hitting on-hand sets. So your front right would be your setter. And then we got really sophisticated. We figured out you could switch in the front row and do that. But the innovation of the 6-2 or the 5-1 really made a big jump in the game. Now, you had shared with me an interesting story about the development of the 6-2 with I don't know if it's a Japanese national player or a coach that came in and said, hey, you can do this.
Toshi Toyota was a great player in Japan, and he came over to go to graduate school at UCLA. And he came out, and no one knew who he was. And then Al Skates watched him play and said, "You're pretty good." Now, volleyball still wasn't an NC2A sport when Toshi was his first year there. So Toshi could play on the team because it was a club team, basically.
Right.
So he created and brought in all this thing about how the Japanese were doing it at the highest level. Japanese in those days were the best team.
Yeah.
They really attacked the sport as a major sport in that country.
So that was the formation of the 6-2 offense then, that Toshi introduced. And at what point did so you had done some coaching, but I believe you were doing some volunteer coaching or assistant coaching at that point?
I was teaching at Corona Del Mar High School math, and I was coaching basketball and tennis. And then some of the girls, because girls volleyball was first starting, it was pre-Title IX, wanted to get in the gym and play some volleyball. So, we opened the gym and we started playing a little bit. And that was all kind of volunteer. That was in early 70s.
Okay.
But in those days, or it happens in education, the state hit a point where they pink slipped a bunch of teachers. And it was always last on, first off. Right. So I was one of the younger ones, so I was one of the first off when they pink slipped those teachers. So I went in and did some real estate stuff, and it was an exciting time. It was great. The real estate market was great, but I was missing my passion. And so in 1975, my friend Ron Kuhn, who grew up in Corona Del Mar and is a great friend of mine, he and Cindy, was going to coach the varsity team at Newport Harbor. And so he asked me if I would come and coach the JV team just for one season.
Okay.
And I've been doing it ever since.
And what year was that?
1975. So, and then, so when I had my first team at Newport, I figured out, because they had unlimited subs in those days. So I went around and found all my little beach buddies, had little small guys that could play dig and pass and handle the ball. And then I went to the basketball team and picked up all these big old tall guys. One of those guys was one of my best friends is a guy named Donnie Killian. And Donnie's brother Doug had his best friend, a kid that lived down the street named Steve Timmons.
Oh yeah, we should recognize that name, huh?
Yeah, Timmons was very good. But I went to Steve and I said, "Steve, I'm going to coach the JV team. I want you to come out for my team and play. I've got some other guys from the basketball team, and we'll have a good time." One guy that was on that team, interesting side story, was Ted McGinley, who went on to be a famous actor in Happy Days and
You're
Married
kidding.
with Children and all that stuff. But he had been the ball boy at UCI for the basketball team when I
Mm-hmm.
played there. And so when we come out of the game towards the end, I'd go down to the end of the bench and just fool around with him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fast forward to 75, 76, and he comes. He'd been a water polo player at Newport Harbor and a
Mm-hmm.
good one. But those guys were forced to swim in the spring, and he didn't want to swim his senior year in the spring. So he said, "Can I come and play on your JV team?" So, well, you're a senior. He goes, "I just want to play." And I go, "Absolutely, come and play." And so then later on, he went on to be. So I had Ted, who went on to be, a famous actor.
Mm-hmm.
And then Timmons, I asked to come out. And he goes, "Charlie, I saw those guys passing underhand. I don't think I'm very good at that." I
Uh-huh.
said, "Steve, don't worry. You won't have to pass."
So what year in school was Steve Timmons?
Junior.
A
He's a
junior
junior.
year. A
Yeah,
very late start
late
these
start.
days. Yeah.
And so Steve, and he also said, I saw those guys diving on the floor. I don't know if I want to do that. I go, "Hey, Steve, just come out. You won't have to do that." So the teams were, basically for my JV team, it was every time it was subs two, little guy for big guy, a big
Mm-hmm.
guy for a little guy. So the front row was always big, the back row was always little, and
Right.
we rolled. We beat every team we played until we went down to play Laguna Beach.
Uh-huh.
Laguna Beach's team had about 8 guys, and they were all about 5'7" or 5'8". Nobody
Uh-huh.
very tall, no one really very small,
Mm-hmm.
but they hammered us.
Yeah.
So I went to their coach after the game because I wanted to find out how they'd gotten so good. And his name was Rolf Ingen,
Mm-hmm.
and Rolf Ingen was a legend in the game in the 50s,
Uh-huh.
60s, and this was in the 70s. And he said, "Well, Charlie, we have a little thing called a volleyball club, so our guys can play year round." So my
Mm-hmm.
eyes lit up, basically because I want to go back and beat Rolf next time. So I picked his brain for a month, and I
Mm-hmm.
started Balboa Bay Volleyball Club after that.
75,
75,
76.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Now,
then Timmons only lasted a month on the JV team before they pulled him up to the varsity.
oh,
And
so you got cherry picked?
yeah, 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 that's what happens. So yeah.
Now, so you've got Steve Timmons now in the game. You've picked a fellow coach here in the area, and we know it's a volleyball-rich area. There's so much history of beach volleyball, and but there are some other big names in this area and coaches that I mean, all of you have been in this circle and have helped each other develop. Can you speak a little bit about that here and how that's contributed to the growth of the game?
Absolutely. One of the biggest influences on my teaching of the sport was a guy named Dale Flickinger. And Dale
Hmm.
Flickinger ran the Orange County Volleyball Club early. Actually, a guy named Chuck Irby had started it, but
Hmm.
Dale was running it. We had decided we were going to go to Junior Olympics and we had to have a fundraiser. So I had all my guys, these Bill Yardley and
Hmm.
Kevin Droke and Bruce Caldwell and Kyle Slaughter, and we
Yeah.
were big, and we were going to play the girls team on a girls net and then sell tickets to the event.
Wow.
So it was
Okay.
it was a we had a lot of tickets, mostly parents, but had a lot of tickets sold. People were there, and
Hmm.
our guys are 6'2", 6'3", and it's a girls 7'4" net, hammering the ball, and then the game starts, and they beat us 15-2, 15-3, 15-2. The girls beat the boys. So I
Yeah.
went to Dale and I said, "Why? What's wrong with our guys?" And he goes, "Well, your ball control's not very good."
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I sat down with Dale and just got as many uh, techniques and as many drills as I could to work on increasing the ball control, which
Hmm.
I think is one of the reasons that our teams here initially, boys teams especially, were pretty good because we really worked on more than just hitting and blocking.
Yeah.
I can remember playing when I was coaching in Newport. The next year I took over the varsity.
Hmm.
I can remember playing against Huntington Beach High School. Huntington Beach High School had a real good setter, football player setter, Mike Delisandro, who was good. And they also had a middle blocker, real thin middle blocker, Danny Glenn.
Danny
And
was a middle.
Danny was a middle, yeah. And And so I was playing against those guys when I was
Hmm.
coaching and they were still playing. Now they've become, now they're the old men of coaching,
Yeah.
so it's grown.
Now, you mentioned a lot of names that are really big still in the volleyball game. Danny's still coaching Newport Harbor, and it's kind of downshifted for Danny. And then you still see Deli coaching at the Balboa Bay Club
Right,
on the boys' side of things.
right.
Um, it's such a great little community here, and they've all contributed to the growth of volleyball just in their influence from you. I mean, being someone that's been in the game and influencing other people to coach in the very similar manner, if not the same style. I mean, what does that mean to you? Because you have this obvious energy for the game, and that's what I picked from that podcast of Belly Digs. You have a love and a particular endearment for the game.
Well, Rob, the greatest part, and you always try and tell people about this before they get involved, is they always see our group together and they go, "You guys are like a family."
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. The relationships go. I mean, you can battle against somebody on the court, either playing or coaching, and just battle like
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And then afterward, you're friends for life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens with all of that. Mike D'Alessandro was on our first Balboa Bay team
Oh.
ever, and in with Timmons and
Mm-hmm.
Dougie Killian and a lot of guys. Mark Slevko, a lot of guys. And so it just keeps build. This family just keeps building and building and building.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun for me now to watch Dan Glenn's kids play
Yeah.
and then see how they are compared to how he was when he played. So
So who's better, Caden Teagan or Danny?
well, Tegan's pretty good, Jaden's pretty good, Rogan's the up and coming, so they're all good. The funny story about Timmons is um, Timmons went on to be a really good player at SC. After
Mm-hmm.
he sat out a year because he was growing so much, and then he went to Orange Coast and they won the state championship in basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and then they were second in the state in volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ernie Hicks called and wanted to know about him going to SC, so he went to SC to play volleyball. But they had Hovland, they had Dusty, they had Obradovic, they
Mm-hmm.
had, I mean, they had so many guys, Pat Powers. They had some really, really good players.
Yeah.
So Timmons was a good player, but he was just a good player.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went to work out with the national team. That whole national team in the early '80s was a fist fight every day
Yeah.
because they were all so competitive. They'd all argue touches and argue plays and argue
Mm-hmm.
about the score, and it was just a very, very competitive thing. And I think that brought a lot of Dusty and Karch are the thing that separated those guys. They were going to finish dinner before you finished dinner. They were going to walk across the street before you were going to walk
They
across the
were
street.
that
They
competitive,
were
huh?
that competitive with everything they did. And so I think that really brought it out. Well, Steve was still a pretty good player.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started setting this little back row set out of the back row on the right side, and they
Mm-hmm.
called it a D, and it eventually became a red because
Mm-hmm.
red-haired Steve Timmons became the best in the world at it.
Wow.
So now, fast forward to the '84 Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Rolf Ingen is the commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
He assigns most of our little coaching family to different jobs at that Olympics. My job was the scoreboard operator. Greatest job ever. Point here, point there, and I'm front row for everything. It was wonderful. So afterward, and USA won,
Mm-hmm.
beat Brazil in the final. It was really, really an eye opener. Great, great thing. And then in those days, I had a little casual sportswear store that you remember, Charlie's Brand of
Yes,
sportswear.
I do. That was the
And
place.
if you remember, we had all those pictures of different players around the store. Well, Steve comes in with a picture of him hitting over the Brazilian guy, William da Silva, hitting over him.
Uh-huh.
And I said, Steve, I was at the Olympics. I was a scoreboard operator. I saw you. I saw every one of your games. You still don't dive, and you still don't pass, and you were the most valuable player in those Olympics. And so he had emerged to that. So
Well, that's actually a great segue because now seeing that the transformation of the game to where we're at today, you have Steve Timmons at the opposite position, and now you have Matt Anderson. Can you talk about some of the changes that have been occurring over the years, and just your thoughts on where the game is going.
Matt Anderson is, very seldom do you have an opposite that also is equally as good at playing left side. His
Yeah,
ball control skills are really, really good.
yeah,
He improved so much. Mark Pavlik does a great job at Penn State, and that's where he played
hmm
and grew up on the East Coast. And he was so good and so talented, and it was really neat to see those guys win and do well. But he did something really, really unique for volleyball.
hmm
He left after his junior year and signed a pro contract and went to Korea.
yeah,
And that's hard to do that for somebody to give money to someone who really hasn't finished what they're doing.
yeah.
But his skills are, I mean, he if he wanted to, he could be a great beach player
Oh, that's the first time I heard that. But that would
because
be,
he can do it all.
hmm
He obviously can block pretty well. He done that. He could pass and dig pretty well. He had to play left side.
yeah,
Um, that's the problem, I think. With not the problem, but one of the
challenges.
challenges that John Sproul will have to solve with our team is: do you play Anderson on the right or on the left?
hmm
Is that backup at either one of those positions going to be the best alternative?
Yeah,
So, and that's because he's so good.
yeah.
So,
The also just one of the things I've realized from the late '80s to now is the pace of the ball. Um, Talk about some of the pace, the speed of the balls that are being hit versus in the '80s.
well, the back row attack really changed a lot of things, especially initially, because now you had four hitters or sometimes five hitters
hmm
um, hitting, and you still only have three blockers.
hmm
But the speed of how they set those sets now is what really changes it. They run something up the middle out of the back row and the front row. Well, it's basically like an X,
hmm
but they're setting the new set that Sproul brought in called the BIC
Yeah,
so low and so quick that it's not like an X. It's like a double quick at the same time.
yeah,
Then they're bringing the guys in on 30s and 40s, which are kind of inside BICs, if you will.
yeah,
And all of a sudden, there's like seven different spots the ball could come from.
yeah.
And so it really is quite a unique game. If you're lucky enough to get a touch on something, you're really ahead of the game. But, Rob, it all depends on passing.
That's right.
If you don't pass, just like when you're in JV on the seventh grade team, if you don't pass,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Well, it's funny, like even just from an evaluation standpoint of volleyball and watching it, that volley dork in me, like bad passing, you only have your pins as your options, and
Sometimes only one of them.
yeah,
Some of them you're only the back row guy.
yep.
Yeah.
And then there's the increase, like the level of play above the net, and your back row attackers. Sometimes it might as well just be a front row set.
Yep. Yep.
So, excuse me.
At that top level, most of the time, it might as well be a front row set.
Excuse me. There are obviously a lot of good players in the game. Let's go by position. What you've seen as like top players that you've worked with or that you see in the world.
Rob,
I know.
45 years.
That's why I had to put that in front of you.
Girls and guys, and there's, and plus I kind of look more closely at who are competitors.
hmm
Who are competitors?
Right.
I was lucky enough to coach April Ross, and she was, she's. I'd go to practice and I'd go, okay, girls, here's this new drill we're gonna have. Here's how you do the drill, and everybody there is listening to how you do the drill, except for April. April's figuring out how to win the drill, not how to do it. Just I want to know how to win it, and that's
Yeah.
what I think is really really special. Because if you're going to talk about the top of the top, that's
hmm
what separates them.
Yeah.
That's the thing I was talking about with Dusty and Karch and Michael Jordan in basketball and all those guys is how important is that for them to be successful.
Yeah. Interesting enough, April was just featured on a podcast with Victoria Garrick, and she was just saying that same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she recently just won the AVP Best Offensive Player, along with Team of the Year with Alex Kleinman, and there's one other award, but it's escaping me.
Best server.
Best server?
I think so.
Oh, that was a Betsy Flint.
Okay.
But
because she was the best server for a while.
Yeah, and she still was. I have some great footage of her from Manhattan Beach and Hermosa of just, I mean, the sound that comes off the ball that she hits.
Yep.
It should have been a co-best server this year, again. But April is definitely a competitor. She's now in the Newport Harbor High School Wall of Fame, or Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
How is it like coaching her growing up through the club years, high school, and then seeing her develop through college, which there wasn't even a beach team, and now she's just a beach phenom?
She really attacked it. She really went about it well. Her dad, Glenn, brought her I used to have that clinic at the Balboa Bay Club in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And between the 7th and 8th grade year, Glenn brought her into the clinic, and April goes, "No, I'm a soccer player. I'm not playing volleyball." And her dad says, "No, you're going to take Charlie's clinic."
Uh-huh.
So she took the clinic, and then the rest is history. I mean, she just took off with the game and ran and played varsity as a freshman for Dan Glenn at Newport. Mm-hmm. But the difference was always her competitive level.
Right.
She always, we went up to play a team in club, and it was a team from Utah, and there was the buzz about this one girl on this team from Utah, Logan Tom. And I got there and I scouted and I watched and I went over to April and I said, "April, I'd like to kind of match you up on her." And April goes, "Put me in front of her every time." So when we played them, if Logan Tom were in the middle, April went middle. If she were on the left, April went right. Every time, just to match her up, both hitting and blocking on her. And at that time, I just go, well, that tells you. So sometimes April's on the right, ball gets dug, she has to set. No problem.
Yeah.
She could set. So
yeah,
it just tells you something about that competitiveness.
Well, being in the area, you live here in Costa Mesa, Newport, and seeing the likes of Steve Timmons come through, but also Misty May and April Ross. Comparing the three players, being that it's a geo thing here, what are the things that caught your eye about their performances and how they've elevated their game to be so successful on such high levels?
Well, Timmons was really, he competed and he loved to compete, and but he also had that red hair, and he had his company Red Sand, who made shorts and stuff, and it was he had such a wonderful personality and was so dynamic, and people just loved him. But remember I told you he didn't want to dive or pass?
Yeah.
Well, the thing I really will always marvel is how he went on to be such a successful AVP player.
Yeah.
He and Brian Lewis won a lot of tournaments together, and he was passing, he was diving, he was doing all of it at a high level.
Right.
And that was neat. Misty and April were both, Misty's dad, I think she probably was playing volleyball before she was walking. He had her playing early, and Butch is one of the best sand coaches anywhere around. Mm-hmm. Also extremely competitive. And so both April and Misty were very, very lucky to be involved with Coach Glenn's program at Newport Harbor, right, who emphasizes playing in the sand. And he has now he has the sand high school league that they play in, mm-hmm, which they didn't have then. But
right,
the training was quite often he'd take the team down to San Onofre, and they'd surf and play 6-on-6 on the beach.
Yeah,
no better game for conditioning, not just physically but mentally, mm-hmm, because the 6-on-6 on the beach, the rallies go and go and go and go. So if you let up, the rally stops, and it's all on you.
Yeah.
So you really learn to focus for an extended amount of time. But those things, I think, were really a good part of their growth. Mm-hmm. Obviously, both of them really great athletes and very competitive. Mm-hmm. Both of them were tops in the state in high jump. Both of them were really good basketball players. Both were really good soccer players.
Multi-sport athletes.
Yes, and talented, all of them. So.
Now, in your career, you've got to work under some great coaches or with great coaches. Can you talk about some of your experiences and the things that you've brought into your coaching style these days?
Well, 1979 and 80, I was coaching Newport's girls and boys, and we were fortunate enough to win the CIF championship in both. And then in those days they had a national championship, and we won the national high school championship in both sports. And I left after that because a coach at the University of Hawaii had recruited 4 of our girls, but ended up with 3 of them to go play at University of Hawaii. So Dave Shoji, I went to Hawaii not really knowing Dave and not really knowing what was going to go on, and living with him for 3 years. And I learned so much about gamesmanship and game coaching and adjustments and things like that from him, as well as being, a great friend. But I always like to credit him with a lot of my growth as far as understanding that the responsibilities of coaching and then what you can do to alter what's going on from the coaching standpoint. I was lucky enough to go to UCLA after that and work with Andy Banakowski, who is a wonderful guy and kind of does things different than Dave does them, but it's also very successful.
Right.
And so that was a step I really, really enjoyed. As I mentioned, Dale Flickinger earlier and Rolf Engen. One of the ones that I thought was I really have learned a lot from, and I really admire this guy, is when I retired from the men at UCI and took over the women, they brought in John Spraw from UCLA, who I'd known because he'd played at UCLA, and he was the assistant coach when I was coaching the men at UCI. And I told him, I said, these guys are going to get a lot better under you. And they did, because he was so innovative and creative. I would go in his office, and he has this big whiteboard, and he has things written up there, and you look and you go, what is that? What is that? And he goes, like the Bic. And he goes, Jason Jablonski could hit the one basically out of the back row. So they started setting him the Bic behind behind a quick hitter from the middle. And he goes, but I don't know, we don't want to call it a pipe.
Right.
He goes, I think we'll call it a back row quick, or a Bic.
Yeah.
From back row quick. Things like that, you just kind of go, that's pretty, I like that,
Creative group of guys.
Yeah.
And he usually brings in very similar guys that are humorous as well. So.
Yeah. It's fun to be with him. So.
Yeah, so confirm the story. I think you're actually on the interview committee for John Spraw, but did he come in with literally a 5-year plan?
5-year plan, and to the T. Came in the first year, he had a pretty good group because we had a good group, and he took them, and they battled Hawaii. They were kind of up in that top spot for a little while, and then had an injury or two and kind of fell off. Then he went through 2 or 3 years of building and suffering, and that's kind of what you do. If you talk to those good ADs, like when I first went to UCI, Dan Guerrero said it's 3 years you should see a change, 5 years we'll see what you can do. And so you need to be patient with coaches. Give them that 3 to 5 year thing. John said 5 years. And that 5th year, in the 4th year, they're the NC2A finals, and the 5th year they're winning it all.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he had brought in when he came in.
Which is funny. I was having a discussion about that national championship, and had the lights not gone out, I always wonder what would have happened, because we were making that run towards the end in the 5th set. So, but that's just the anteater in me. So,
I might have made the sub back to the guy who had in before he came out, but that's my own opinion.
So amazing hire, and John ended up winning 3 national championships. And now David Niffen, former player to John, has come in, and definitely a different philosophy, but still great winning ways in the program.
It's classic. Both the men's coach at UCI and the women's coach at UCI were former setters on my team at UCI when I was coaching. So maybe there's something about being a setter that equates to being a coach.
Well, the setters are the brain of the whole trust.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah. No, Niff does it differently, and he definitely has his the community, the culture, they like to say, that is unique to him. Those that enjoy it really enjoy it, and those that don't, there's a lot of other options. So, and he does a great job of that.
Okay. So. We are currently in the women's collegiate season, and we're getting towards the end. what are some of the things that you're seeing on the women's sides of things that stand out competitively and in the development of the players?
We got a lot of women playing volleyball. And I say that, I mean, that's the good news and that's the bad news.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women playing volleyball.
Right.
But the game is pretty spread out now and watered.
Yeah.
Those top 10 teams are very, very outstanding athletes with lots of size.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the rest of the nation. So you have a lot of games that are played in the rally scoring also kind of equates a lot of things, keeps things a lot. So it's a lot more even, I think, at the lower levels.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, the Penn State, the Nebraska, the Stanford, those guys. I mean, those athletes are really, really unique,
Mm-hmm.
and that's I think what separates them. And obviously the coaches, Russ Rose is great, and John
Mm-hmm.
Cook, and Kevin Hamley. Those, I mean, they're all. John Dunning was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of good players kind of the next level. You look, there's 315 Division I schools with 12 full rides. That's a lot of money,
Yeah.
a lot of scholarships.
Yeah.
And I think that you're getting more and more people playing volleyball because they see that opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
which is good because more people are playing. But I also think the overall picture is kind of getting more spread out at the next level.
Right.
Not the top level, but the
Mm-hmm.
next level down. The other thing you see a lot of, unfortunately, is injuries.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of knees with the girls,
Yeah.
and a lot of, and again, they talk about anatomically that being, the process or whatever. But I think that's something that, smart coaches now really need to learn how to be preventative in their training.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't help, all these club programs, they all go play in those tournaments, and they're tournaments on concrete, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone goes, well, there's sport court down. Well,
Yeah.
it's on concrete.
Yeah.
And you're jumping for 8-10 hours a day,
Yeah.
3 or 4 days in a row.
On a convention room floor.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not, you see a lot of injuries earlier than you ever saw before.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Well, it seems that obviously there's the two schools of thought. There's the, specialize, and then the other people, that the other school of thought that says diversify and rest. I've been seeing a lot more of these injuries that you alluded to, and it just seems like rest is the best healer of things, and also just learning how to do some other things to keep your passion for the game.
I always wanted to recruit multi-sport athletes because they had time to get away from volleyball and develop other muscle groups.
Mm-hmm.
They had time to socially be with different people.
Yeah.
They had time to be in different competitive situations, which each sport generates, whether it's you're going to an individual sport or working with a different type of team.
Right.
Volleyball, I've always loved teaching volleyball to little kids
Mm-hmm.
because I've always said if anybody could be good at volleyball if they want to be good enough.
Yeah.
If you want to go work at it, anybody can learn to play this game. And when you first start it, because it is a team function, you're a part of that function. So if you can't pass, it's pretty glaringly obvious that you're not making it work. So
Right.
you're not probably a little bit down on yourself, or
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not. Maybe just let it go. But then because through repetition, you develop those skills.
Yeah.
And now you become a valuable part of that team function. You pass it, they set it, somebody hits it.
Right.
Then you look in the mirror as a little kid and you go, I'm pretty good. Go, self, I'm pretty good. So now they have developed self-confidence.
Yeah.
Not mom and dad saying, oh, sweetie, you're so good.
Mm-hmm.
They look in the mirror and go, I'm good. I worked at this.
Yep.
How great a lesson in life is that?
It's a great lesson.
That's what it should be all about.
Firsthand with my daughter now playing with.
Yep.
So the circle of life through Orange County Volleyball Club.
With her pink shoes.
That's right. She had to stick out.
Yes, she does.
And one of the things that caught my ear in the last podcast was the passion you have for the game.
Oh.
It was. I mean, obviously we all have a certain passion, but I feel like you have a special passion for the game. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
I'm 72 years old.
Not supposed to ever tell your age. Mary Poppins says that.
And everyone goes, well, when do you want to retire? And I go, retire? Here I am. I'm teaching a game I love to little kids. Walk in the gym every day, high five a bunch of kids, and watch them develop. It doesn't get better than that. What else could you do that'd be better than that?
Yep.
And I think that's, I think that I'm so blessed to do what I love doing. I mean, a lot of people go to work every day and they don't have a smile, and I feel very, very lucky to be involved with this game and with the people I have, and plus, the community, especially in this little area here, has been so supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a very unique thing, though, and then I try not to share my personal experiences, but one of the things that stuck out from my late father with you is that you're a man of character and integrity, because you taught the basic skills like eye contact, handshake, firm shake, no floppy fish shakes, communicate, listen, be sure you listen, don't talk over anyone else. But some of the fundamental things that parents do, but you reinforce that in your program.
Oh, thank you.
So, but we see that with our daughter now, who's playing in the clinics, and just the athletes. We see you consistently through the program. All your coaching staff is very similar.
Yeah, thank you very much. Athletics are just a matter about teaching about life. It's just an avenue to teach life. And as long as we all understand that and go about it with that in mind, I think you can really do a lot to help young people with that. So,
well, you've touched a lot of athletes, kids, and families, because it's not just a kid thing. It's definitely, it goes as deep as the families. So, it's thank you for your contributions to volleyball, I guess.
No, I just roll the balls out, let them play. So.
I think it's a good place to end there. There's so much more I can talk about, and there's so many things I want to tap into. But I am going to mention this because we didn't want to focus on it, but you were just recently inducted into the Southern California Indoor Volleyball Hall of Fame, and I was looking back at the honorees, and you actually coached some of the people already in there.
Yeah. I know it's very kind of them, and I'm humbled by this award. It's really nice of them. I always enjoy those, whether you're receiving or you're giving or whatever, just because we're all so unique. It's just fun to see what everybody's all about. So,
well, I can't wait.
Sue Gazansky, who was also honored, is a tremendous coach and a great friend, and you just again, it goes back. We're all family.
Yeah.
So Ohana,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see the picture at the end of the banquet this year, because I feel like I know a lot of people. I believe this is year 3, and a lot of the people that I know from that were people I've met through you. Because it's you
just
that I got
you know?
into this game. So,
yeah.
So thank you for taking time this afternoon,
Absolutely.
Charlie. And there could be other opportunities. We'll see where it goes from here, because we have a lot. And I know there's other questions, and maybe get you in on some college analysis too of the recent play.
Love to.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.